Today, I'm going to go into why the politicians are using language like this against the central banks. We know that the interest rates have been cut here in Australia 2 days ago on the 1st of October 2019 down to the record levels, or at least the lowest levels in 50 years, way below what was known as the emergency levels back in the 2008 during the global financial crisis. So current rates, for those who've been sleeping for the last 72 hours, the rate is 0.75%. Most of us know this by now, but why would Donald Trump say something like this? This is a few days ago, but it's very relevant to what Josh Frydenberg also said here in Australia. So Donald Trump says Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve fail again. No guts, no sense, no vision. A terrible communicator. Now, imagine if somebody at your job told you something like this. You would be crashed, especially somebody like your boss. Donald Trump is Donald Trump, but he's not stupid. So remember, I mentioned before, I think they're actors. They're all acting about why. What is going to happen? Why are they doing what they're doing? An intelligent, half intelligent man, which, Donald Trump is, uh, wouldn't say something like that. Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve fail again. No guts, no sense, no vision. A terrible communicator. There's more. He also said, our Federal Reserve cannot mentally keep up with the competition, other countries. At the G7 in France, all of the other leaders were giddy about how low the interest rate costs have gone. Germany is actually getting paid to borrow money, zero interest plus no Fed clue, or no clue fled. Sorry, obviously haven't had my coffee this morning.
The Treasurer isn't happy either.
Well, the banks have a lot of explaining to do, and customers should vote with their feet.
But they
What is this customer should vote with their feet? So he's not happy. He's expecting the rates, the full 25 basis points to be passed on to the consumers as far as the mortgages. Why is he pretending? Why is he acting as if he cares and as if consumers have options to go and vote with their feet and go to the other bank, which, by the way, also cut only by half of the official rate cut? He knows that. He's also not stupid.
Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said it was the government's expectation that the banks would pass on the RBA's cut of 25 basis points in full.
Yeah, government's expectations. They knew this didn't happen in the past. It never happened, almost never happened in the past, especially in the last few cuts. And they know full well that the banks cannot, due to their business model, pass on the full interest rate cut, which means that whatever happens in the future, now that the rates are close to zero, it's going to have diminishing returns. Also, let's not forget those other people, the savers.
more than half the money banks lend comes from depositors, and low rates are punishing people who save and rely on interest payments. The Reserve Bank governor gets letters complaining about the hit.
And you know what? Next clip is going to show you how little they care and how they kind of laugh it off. And the most important, the actual gauge of what is going on is what is going on the street. But they obviously live in their ivory towers and they don't care what happens on the street.
And more direct feedback.
As I was coming here this evening, someone yelled out from their car to tell me that I wasn't doing a good job.
Ha 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 ha. How's that funny? That is not funny. You're not doing a good job. So, okay, so we know that when the interest rates were cut from, say, 1.25% to 1% before this last cut, that made absolutely no difference to the economy. The unemployment rate ticked up from 5.2 to 5.3%. So it is, if anything, having a negative effect. So you're going to do exactly that didn't work the last time, you're going to do it again. And then you're laughing as if, why would somebody yell out of their car and say, I'm not doing a good job? This is so bad. This is what they think about your feedback.
As I was coming here this evening, someone yelled out from their car to tell me that I wasn't doing a good job.
And if you think they're going to stop there and doing more of what didn't work in the past, think again.
Another rate cut is forecast so strongly it's almost a certainty. Expect more public anger when banks pass on even less of that.
Because again, banks cannot do it because if the interest rates go negative and they then have to, or close to zero, and then they have to cut the interest rates of the savings accounts down to zero or below, people will actually pick up the money from the bank and store it at home or somewhere else because it'll be safer than anything else, which is brings us over to the fact that they're trying to stop and actually ban cash because of all those bad guys. We know why they want to do it, because if there's no cash, you can't go to the bank and say, give me my $10,000. I'll keep it just in case, because you're not giving me interest. If anything, you're taking away from me. And there's a risk of you going belly up, which means I'll use my 10,000 or 100,000 or $1 million. So let's go back to why would Donald Trump say something like this against the Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell. So Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve fail again. No guts, no sense, no vision. A terrible communicator. Amazing. And again, going and looking into it in parallel in Australia, look what's happening here. So Josh Frydenberg has already said, the government is disappointed because the banks haven't passed on the full cut to the borrowers. Listen to the language.
Critics say the government has been ignoring Reserve Bank pleas to up its spend on infrastructure to get the economy moving.
And that's mainly a task for governments and for business, not for central banks.
See, so Frydenberg says, the banks should do it. Now, Frydenberg doesn't have a problem with the central bank or federal or Reserve Bank in Australia here, because they are cutting, where in America they're not cutting as fast as Trump would like it. I'd like to see what Donald Trump would say to something like this.
Lenders should not be so scared of making a loan that goes bad that they don't provide credit that the economy needs.
So if you say you're a bank, you're a person, and you shouldn't be scared to lend money to someone who is a bit flaky and is unlikely to pay it back, because that guy needs the money. It provides liquidity to that guy and it helps the overall economy. So just give him the money. Banks are private institutions, publicly traded private companies, if that makes sense, that have to answer to their, and not just their customers, but their shareholders. They can't be irresponsible and lending out to, um, you know, individuals who are not on sound financial grounds. It's insane. It's like just lend money to anyone to help this dying economy, and it's still not working. So a small digression here.
Up on the program, lying to get across the loan line. Mortgage fraud on the rise as the credit crunch continues to bite.
It's not an honest mistake. You want to buy as good a house as you possibly can and therefore get as big a loan as you could possibly afford.
Don't worry, I'll bring it all together. There is a common thread here.
Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is pressuring banks to ease mortgage lending restrictions as the construction sector slows down. It comes as a new report shows 4 out of 10 borrowers admit they aren't being truthful on loan applications. An explosion in so-called liar loans precipitated the global financial crisis, but experts don't see the issue in the same light in Australia. Daniel Ziffer reports.
The latest data comes as Treasurer Josh Frydenberg pushes banks to loosen lending. At the Australian Financial Review's property conference last week, he urged people to keep buying for the nation.
Treasury estimates that a 10% increase in house prices could correspond to a resulting lift in GDP of about 0.5%.
So once again, I've said it many times before, is that it's in their interest, including the government, the banks, to actually get you into any loan, any mortgage possible, no matter where the property is going. And if they do convince most people to go into mortgages, the property will continue to go up, because that's the definition of the Ponzi scheme. As long as you've got enough people and money piling into whatever that scheme is, it'll keep going up. As soon as the confidence is lost and as soon as people stop borrowing and believing that what they're buying is going to continue to go up and they'll be making money, that's when the Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes end and crash in spectacular manners, as it has happened in the past so many times. And this one will do the same. I think fewer and fewer people, just like you and me watching this video and me creating this video, are not believing these actors. You need to switch off. You need to think about it yourself and say, is this expensive? Is this insane? Why are they doing this? Why is Donald Trump berating his Jay Powell, the Federal Reserve chairman, when the interest rates are close to the record lows, and he's saying, "Oh, you're not cutting it even lower fast enough." Something is off when you just think about it, when it doesn't pass that smell test. Here is why I think that people are starting to realize what's going on. I think the jig is up. Watch this.
And today we had some housing credit data out. Not good numbers there either.
No, so the housing credit data, which is really a reflection of how much households want to continue to borrow, that continued to be quite anemic, only up 0.2%, and that followed already a weak month previously in July. Now that's on the back of the economy really slowing down, households really cautious with the amount of debt they have, really not wanting to take on a lot more, and obviously weak wages growth. However, going forward, we think there could be a lift.
So, households are not borrowing. The credit growth has slowed. See, that there's more people taking credit, but the actual growth, which is what they rely on, is slowing. Given that there's a revival in the property market, this is actually amazing. It's like, what would happen if the property prices continue to go down? There would be even less. How the easiest way to explain this just quickly, I think, is because the volume is small. So although the prices have ticked up last few months only in Sydney and Melbourne, by the way, um, that has not brought more borrowing and growth in credit because the volume is low, because fewer people are putting their houses on the market because they think, some probably think they can get more, and so there's less stock on the market, so there's less sales, fewer sales. Fewer sales means less stamp duty and less credit growth. Very simple, actually.
Bad times to come, so the confidence isn't there.
Or the PM.
They never learn. They honestly never learn. And it's disappointing. They have a reason to be disappointed in the banks basically profiteering.
Both NAB.
So the banks are profiteering. So let's just conclude here and bring this all together and tie it together. Scott Morrison says that the banks are profiteering for not raising or passing on the full rate cut to the consumers. Not all the consumers, but not the borrowers, but definitely not the savers, but definitely the borrowers. This is the latest up-to-date numbers I have, that 0.25% official interest rate cut down to 0.75. Cash rate has been passed on by ANZ 14 basis points, Commonwealth Bank 13, then NAB and Westpac 15 basis points. So ScoMo says the banks are profiteering. Josh Frydenberg is also winning Oscar-winning performance by not being happy with the banks, so blaming banks. In the United States, Donald Trump is blaming Jay Powell and Federal Reserve that they failed again, they have no guts, no sense, no vision, a terrible communicator. What is going on here? Again, just imagine this sort of language in your workplace. There'd be HR calls happening all the time. There'd be teas from certain people being really disheartened about the feedback that they received from like president of the company. Imagine that. Here's my final thoughts on this video on this subject. I think the blame game has started before it's hit the fan. Before anything has happened, they know something's in the works. When it happens, the government is going to say, Donald Trump is going to say, see, Federal Reserve, I told you should have cut rates much faster like the rest of the world. And then here in Australia, when the property market tanks, which it should have a long time ago, the government's also going to go to the banks and say, see, because you didn't pass on the full interest rate cuts that our Reserve Bank has so diligently cut down to save the economy, but you didn't do it, so they're going to blame the banks, the private banks. Not necessarily the Reserve Bank Australia, but they'll be blaming the big four. And my hunch is that that may happen by January 2020, because I follow Martin Armstrong's economic model, and he's saying that he calls it confidence economic model, or economic confidence model to be precise. And he's got a low of interim low for this cycle on the January 18th, 2020. So normally when he predicts these sort of things, big things happen either exactly on that date or just before that date. So I think something's going to happen by 2020 January, and they are positioning themselves for the blame game.
As I was coming here this evening, someone yelled out from their car to tell me that I wasn't doing a good job. Lenders should not be so scared of making a loan that goes bad that they don't provide credit that the economy needs.
They never learn. They honestly never learn. And it's disappointing. They have a reason to be disappointed in the banks basically profiteering.
The latest data comes as Treasurer Josh Frydenberg pushes banks to loosen lending. At the Australian Financial Review's property conference last week, he urged people to keep buying for the nation.
Treasury estimates that a 10% increase in house prices could correspond to a resulting lift in GDP of about 0.5%.
This is the history in the making, so let's keep an eye on these people and let's record it. Let's document it when it happens. So if you believe what I believe, do like the video, share it, and I'll be making more of these, needless to say. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.